after this person had been arrested for child molestation, I immediately scheduled an interview or a meeting with the stake president. He basically explained that I was really disappointed in the way that he'd handled the situation. I did not go and ask whether or not the ex-bishop was called of God, because I already knew that the God I believed in would not put a child molester in those rooms with children and put children at risk. I did not believe that.
For the past few years, the Mormon Church has been under fire as numerous members of the church have left and are now sharing stories of the horrific abuse they suffered at the hands of their elders, husbands, and the church's leadership. But are these reports made up? Are these instances of abuse an attempt to defame the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints? Is the Mormon Church a cult parading as a denomination of the Christian Church? These are all fantastic questions. In today's video, we are going to attempt to answer all those questions and then some. Stick around until the end because you will want to see exactly what not only I think, but what the cold, hard evidence proves about the Mormon Church. Let's begin our deep dive. Hey, if you're new here, make sure to like and subscribe to our channel. If this is your second or third time back, welcome back. We would like your support, and your likes, comments, and shares really help us to keep this channel going and the good tea coming. Hit that bell so you never miss an upload. The story of the Mormon Church begins in the early 19th century in the United States. It was a time of great religious revival, known as the Second Great Awakening. People from all over were searching for spiritual truth and connections to God. And because of that, new religious movements were popping up all over the place, similar to how McDonald's and Jollibees keep popping up everywhere. And I do mean everywhere. In this kind of environment, a young man named Joseph Smith claimed to have had a series of visions that would radically change the religious landscape, the Christian movement, and basically the faith landscape forever. Born in 1805 in Sharon, Vermont, Joseph grew up in a relatively large, hardworking family. They moved around a lot, which did affect Joseph growing up. And eventually the family ended up settling down in upstate New York. Joseph's journey began when he was just 14 years old. According to his account, in 1820, he went into some woods near his house to pray and ask God which church he should join. In what is known as the first vision, he said he saw God the Father and Jesus Christ, who told him not to join any existing church because they were all completely wrong. Side note, I must say that there have been numerous reports by ex-Mormons that the entire story of the first vision was later added to Joseph Smith's original story to make him look better. It has also been said that Smith lied about a great deal of his story.
During a recent fireside, a brother Dirkmat of the Joseph Smith Papers tried to answer a few questions concerning the first vision. While I am not a historian, I have done a lot of research concerning the first vision, and I wanted to weigh in on this subject.
You won't find historians who will say things like, well, because Joseph Smith told the story more than once, he obviously was just making it up. You'll find someone on YouTube who will say that, but you won't find a non-Latter-day Saint historian doing religious studies is not going to say the fact that Joseph talked about this vision that he had multiple times and the fact that he didn't say the exact same words every time proves he's making it up. You'll find someone on a TikTok saying that, but you won't find someone in a university saying that.
Nobody cares that Joseph Smith gave 4 accounts of his first vision. That he told it 4 times is not the problem. The problem is that the accounts are late, they contradict themselves, and they contradict the historical record. So let's go over the historical record versus what Joseph Smith said. Joseph says that 5 of his family members joined the Presbyterian Church before his first vision took place. History actually tells us that they joined in 1824, after Alvin died at the end of 1823. This would push the vision to sometime in 1824 or after, making Joseph Smith 18 years old. William Smith, Joseph's brother, references Reverend Stockton and Reverend Lane as being part of the Palmyra revivals that spurred Joseph Smith's first vision. Neither of these men were stationed in Palmyra until 1824. It was Reverend Stockton that condemned Alvin to hell and that spurred his family to join the Presbyterian Church. And it was Reverend Lane who pointed Joseph to James 1:5, which also spurred the first vision. Additionally, I find no evidence that there were any revivals in Palmyra in 1820. Joseph Smith was strictly instructed, in at least one of the accounts, not to join any of the other religions. In the summer of 1828, Joseph Smith sought membership in the Methodist Sunday School. In one of the accounts, Joseph Smith says he was heavily persecuted for sharing his first vision. There is no historical evidence during this time, or at any point in his life, that he was persecuted for seeing God in Jesus. In the Book of Commandments, and the Articles and Covenants, and in the 1830 edition of the Book of Mormon, Jesus is God. And in all of the lectures of faith in the Doctrine and Covenants, Jesus Christ has a body of flesh and bones, and God is a personage of spirit. The 1838 account of the first vision is the only one that explicitly says that Joseph Smith saw Jesus Christ and God the Father. According to him at that time, they both have bodies of flesh and bones. So, Brother Dirkmatt, it's not that there are 4 accounts of the first vision. It's that those 4 accounts contradict history.
For this part of the video, I'll be telling you about his origin as is written and told by current Mormon practitioners. Moving on. 3 years later, in 1823, Joseph claimed he was visited by an angel named Moroni. This angel told him about a set of golden plates buried in a nearby hill. These plates, written in a language Joseph described as Reformed Egyptian, contained the history about the ancient American civilization and their dealings with God. After 4 years of annual visits to the hill, Joseph was finally allowed to take the plates in 1827. Joseph Smith translated the golden plates into what is now known as the Book of Mormon, which was established in 1830. He said he used divine help to read the ancient script, often with the help of seer stones. The Book of Mormon tells a story of 2 ancient civilizations in the Americas and their interactions with Jesus Christ. On April 6, 1830, Joseph Smith and a small group of followers officially organized what was originally called the Church of Christ, later known as the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, LDS Church. The church quickly grew as Joseph and his enthusiastic followers spread their message, often facing significant oppositions and persecutions from other groups. The persistent persecutions they faced forced the early Mormons to move several times. They established communities throughout Ohio, Missouri, and Illinois, where they built the city of Nauvoo. Look, I am probably butchering this, so please forgive me. If you know how to pronounce it, please comment below. After a while, tensions with non-Mormon neighbors often led to violence. In 1844, Joseph Smith and his brother Hiram were killed by a mob while imprisoned in Carthage, Illinois. After Joseph Smith's death in 1844, Brigham Young emerged as the new leader of the church. In 1847, he led a large group of Mormons westward to the Salt Lake Valley in the present-day Utah. This migration is one of the most significant events in Mormon history because it symbolized the church's resilience and desire for a place where they could practice their faith freely. Under Brigham Young's leadership, the Mormons established a thriving community in the Utah territory. They built cities, temples, and a strong communal society. Despite ongoing conflicts with the U.S. government over issues like polygamy, the church continued to grow and evolve. These kinds of issues, such as conflicts with the government over issues like polygamy, abuse, and cult-like behavior, leads us to part 2, the Mormon Church now. LDS Church has faced numerous scandals, controversies, and issues in recent years. Many of these issues have come to light thanks to former members who have spoken about their horrific experiences. One of the most disturbing controversies involves allegations of sexual abuse within the church. Numerous reports have surfaced of church leaders covering up abuse and protecting perpetrators. For example, the Associated Press reported in 2022 about a significant case in Arizona.
They tell me you're going to go in and you're going to recant everything that you told your therapist. This happened around my 17th birthday. They send me into his office. I sit down and I don't tell him anything because I didn't know what to do. So I understood then that there was an element of therapist confidentiality there that I could potentially tell him what was going on. And I kind of did in kind of a roundabout fashion. And so after the session, I don't recant it because I thought, I was protected by confidentiality. So I walk back to our car, I get in, and the first thing that they say, they're like, did you recant your statement? Like, did you say that? Because they told me I needed to say I made it up, and I wasn't going to do
Wasn't that it was a dream or something?
Yeah, something along those lines, like either say that you imagined it, or you were crying for attention, or it was a dream, or I had to come up with some way that I made it up. And so
a man named David Bennett served prison time for. He was let out of his cage, joined the church, and was called to be the young men's president. There was about 6 or 7 of us boys, and he would have us over to his house on the weekends. One of the nights, I stayed. I don't even know that anything happened except I woke up with no clothes on. He had gotten mad at me the next morning, and he spanked me. He had a temper. He was just a dark individual. And I went straight to my dad when I got home. I said, Dave spanked me, Dad. But the abuse continued. We'd continue to go to his house. We'd continue to go on church campouts. One particular night, I couldn't move. I was drugged. I could speak. I just kept saying, stop, stop, please stop. You can't speak to animals like this. They belong in cages. And it wasn't what he did to me that was painful. It was that he made the other boys watch as he did it to me. This man was arrested, spent like a week in jail, and disappeared. We spent our childhood fearing that he was going to pop out of the bushes and take us. So that's the beginning of my Mormon story.
After this person had been arrested for child molestation, I immediately scheduled an interview or a meeting with the stake president. He basically explained that I was really disappointed in the way that he'd handled the situation. I did not go and ask whether or not the ex-bishop was called of God, because I already knew that the God I believed in would not put a child molester in those rooms with children. And put children at risk. I did not believe that. I did not ask that question because I didn't want the answer, or I didn't want to hear his answer, frankly. Enough people had come and talked to him concerned about the situation that he volunteered the answer anyways, which was also very horrifying. He said, and I was alone at this
because he would have called the original bishop.
He called this bishop, yes. And he told me that he wanted to testify that the Lord had called this bishop, and that sometimes the Lord works in mysterious ways.
Came into the room and started touching me in kind of the way, the joking way that he had been doing for months, which I had many times told him not to, and had even hit him a couple times and pushed him away from me. But this time he actually got on top of me.
Another major issue is the church's financial secrecy. In 2019, a whistleblower revealed that the church had amassed a $100 billion investment fund by collecting tithes from its members. This amount was supposed to be used ostensibly for charitable purposes, but much of it was not being used as intended. These raised questions about transparency and the church's true financial practices, both amongst its members and from others from the outside.
Explain how the tithe is supposed to be used.
It's swept into Ensign Peak accounts every week. And eventually the cash builds until it becomes a substantial amount. And then that tithing will get allocated to Ensign Peak's funds. Tithing from the church's perspective is to do the work of building the kingdom of God. But tithing is also used for saving. The church has made it clear a significant portion of their tithing is saved on a regular basis. probably around 20%. And that seems like a reasonable use of tithing to save for a rainy day.
They say that the money's tithed with no strings to it, that it's a matter of trust, and that you have to trust that it's going to be invested in the right way, and that's what we're here for.
Well, it's easy to manage if you don't have to be accountable, right? If you just say, trust us, and we won't tell you, then sure, it's easier to manage. You can move money around however you want. Anyone who asks a question isn't going to get an answer. I don't think that's healthy.
In my country, we say people's churches, the Protestants, the Catholics, they publish all their budgets openly to all the public.
Yeah.
Why it's impossible for your church?
Well, we simply think that that information belongs to those who made the contribution and not to the world. That's the only thing.
If that information belongs to those who made the contribution, then why did the church try to hide this information from us as tithe-paying members by forming 13 shell companies? Why were we, as tithe-paying members, never given access to a report of church finances? And why did detailed reporting of church finances stop after 1959? Let me know what you think.
Many former Mormons, who are often referred to as ex-Mormons, have shared their stories publicly as well. These thousands of stories have shed light on the reasons behind their departure. Websites like the Ex-Mormons Reddit community, TikTok, and YouTube channels by ex-Mormons have provided large platforms for these voices. A very important resource for many leaving the church is the CES letter written by Jeremy Reynolds. This document outlines inconsistencies and troubling aspects of Mormon church history and doctrine that the Mormon church does not openly discuss or want to acknowledge. The letter has prompted many to question their LDS faith and eventually leave the church. Another example is John Dellin, who hosts the podcast Mormon Stories, where he interviews former members about their experiences. Some beliefs and practices of the LDS Church have been largely criticized for being contrary to biblical Christian teachings. For example, the nature of God. Mormons believe in a God who was once a man and that humans can become gods themselves, which differs significantly from the biblical view of an eternal and unchanging God. You must be married. Mormons believe that you cannot enter heaven unless you are married. This often leads to members getting married very young or members engaging in polyamory.
In the Mormon temple marriage, the partners are sealed to each other for time and all eternity in Mason-like rituals. And without this ceremony, no one can enter the presence of Joseph Smith and become a god.
The Book of Mormon. Mormons hold the Book of Mormon as scripture, but its historical and archaeological claims are widely disputed by scholars. Many critics of the LDS Church often describe them as having several cult-like characteristics. Let's take a look at some of these behaviors. Control and isolation. Many former members describe a culture of control within the church. This includes expectations to marry very young, as I mentioned before, have large families, and prioritize the church's activities over your own interests or career aspirations. There is also a strong emphasis on blind obedience to church leaders, which often means they have the only and final say.
And I'm going from like how cults use missions to how corporations use missions, and I'm going to use missions to manipulate people often and to get their labor. And then I'm going to slide right into Mormon missions as kind of an ultimate example of missionizing in order to exploit labor.
Hi, my name is Julia. I served my mission from 2012 to 2014. I served in Salt Lake, Park City, Green River, Wyoming, Holiday, that whole area. So the way that I frame what a cult is comes from the research of Stephen Hassan, or the bite model, which is how cults control people. Behavior, information, thoughts, and emotions. As you were talking, something popped into my head and I wanted to share it. First of all, I think that there are two aspects of the Mormon Church that are hands down extremely culty. As in, they follow directly the path and pattern of the bite model. And one of those is the Mormon mission. And I could go on for hours how Mormon missions are a cult, but I just wanted to share one thing for right now. So within the aspect of information control, Stephen Hassan describes it a little further. Cults engage in information control when they minimize or discourage access to non-cult sources of information, including internet, TV, radio, books, articles, newspapers, magazines, media. Critical information, former members, keep members busy so they don't have time to think and investigate, control through cell phone with texting, calls, internet tracking. All of this is heavily practiced on a Mormon mission. But right now I wanted to talk about books. So as a missionary, your study time is dedicated to 3 different books: the scriptures, your Preach My Gospel manual, and the Little White Bible or the Mission Handbook. You are to read your scriptures for an hour a day, the Preach My Gospel manual for an hour a day, and at least 3 pages of the handbook every single day. Outside of these 3 books, missionaries are only allowed to read 4 other books, or at least during the time that I served. And those books are Our Heritage, True to the Faith, Our Search for Happiness, and Jesus the Christ. So for 18 months to 2 years, that's it. That's all you get to read. Even things published and produced by Deseret Book are not allowed. If you wanted to read something different, you had to get special permission from the mission president, and sometimes he just said no. So when I left on my mission, I brought these 4 extra books with me because I love to read. I had a bachelor's degree in literature. Of course I'm going to bring every book allowed. However, when I was in the Missionary Training Center, my district and I were all talking about how we're going to read the missionary library, or these 4 books, and be absolute scholars on our mission. But then my teacher said something that really struck me. She said, I had that same goal as a missionary, but then I realized something. I realized that I'm not asking my investigators to read Jesus the Christ or Our Heritage. What I was asking them to read was the Book of Mormon. So I'm sitting there in the MTC with all 4 books that I'm allowed, and I thought, you know what? She's right. I'm going to do what she did and not read these 4 extra books. I am only going to read the Book of Mormon. So I did. For 18 months, I read the Book of Mormon over and over and over again. I read the Book of Mormon 15 times on my mission. So I guess what I wanted to get at is that within a cult, you're very limited as it is. But what's even crazier, or better depending on how you look at it, is when the members can limit themselves even more than they already are.
Temple secrets. The earliest temples, which are distinct from regular meeting houses, are shrouded in secrecy. Only worthy members can enter the temple, and the ceremonies include rituals that are kept highly confidential. This secretiveness creates a sense of exclusivity and can alienate those who do not conform. To this day, many people have absolutely no idea what happens in the temple.
You are seeing is an authentic first-time ever on film reenactment of secret Mormon temple ceremonies that even most Mormons have never seen. And those who have sworn never to reveal these secrets under penalty of death.
The execution of the penalty is represented by placing the right thumb under the left ear, drawing the thumb quickly across the throat to the right ear, and dropping the hand to the side.
All of us who've been through the temple have sworn solemn oaths consenting to having our throats slit and our heart and our vitals torn out.
This is how to be ordained to become a king or queen in the Mormon afterlife. First, in an LDS temple, be washed and anointed and receive a new name with new underwear. You will wear this underwear night and day for the rest of your life. After your washing and anointing, dress in white, covering everything other than your head and your hands. Enter a white room with pews and divide by gender. Learn the laws of God and dress in the robes of the holy priesthood, which are first put on the left shoulder. Next, learn the handshakes, keywords, and signs to ensure you can get past the angels who stand as sentinels and walk back into the presence of the Father. Participate in the true order of prayer. This is done by standing in a circle and repeating, "O God, hear the words of my mouth," 3 times. Stand at the veil of the temple and pass the test to show you know all the correct words and the correct handshakes. Enter through the veil. You are now ordained to be a king or queen in the Mormon afterlife.
Shunning/excommunication. Ex-Mormons often report being shunned by family and friends who remain in the church. They are often treated as though they no longer exist to the family, with many going as far as removing photos of ex-members from their homes. This practice of cutting off relationships with those who leave or question the faith is a common characteristic of high-control groups/cults.
A former bishop from Sugar Land says he's been excommunicated from the Mormon Church. The decision came down today after his fight to stop private meetings between bishops and children in the church. Stephanie Whitfield is in Sugar Land to explain.
This started last year when a Sugar Land dad says he found out his daughter had conversations with her bishop that he considers sexually explicit. He's made his fight to stop this practice in the Mormon church public, and today, church leaders told him he's no longer a member.
We have carefully and prayerfully reviewed this.
Through tears, this former bishop from Sugar Land read a letter sent to him by his church.
The decision of the council that you be excommunicated for conduct contrary to the laws and order of the church.
Excommunication, the result of Sam Young's public plea to stop what he calls sexually explicit interviews of Mormon youth.
Come out of that building right there and come out and demonstrate that you have a strong desire to protect our children.
Young was emotional during a news conference in Salt Lake City. Church leaders, on the other hand, are not talking about the decision. A spokesperson only stating, church discipline is administered by local leaders who are familiar with the individual and his or her circumstances. But the father of 6 says the reason behind the decision is clear.
About that. It was taken only because of my outright public position.
A position he'll continue to fight for, whether he's a member of the Mormon church or not. The former bishop says he does plan to appeal the church's decision. In Sugar Land, Stephanie Whitfield, KHOU 11 News.
So I just received a letter that I have been excommunicated from the church. And basically they said they were doing this out of love. And that's not true. And we have more self-respect than we used to. As a movement, as a people, as a community. And we owe a lot of that to you. Oh. Yeah, I don't know. I just feel sad. And it just makes me angry to know that, you know, so many people out there are just going to be like, oh, this is what she deserved, and, you know, all these other horrible things. But like, it's just very odd to be like a trope. Right, to become a story. Yeah, like something that's so personal and painful, but at the same time, so, like, everyone somehow has a right to know.
Did you think they were going to do it?
No. Like, you don't know until that exact moment how much you thought it wouldn't happen. Like the same thing, you were there when we went to the tabernacle, and I was the only one who thought we're gonna get in. You know what I mean? Like, I'm just like walking up there, like walking up to the door, like I think I'm the only one that thought we would actually get in, and we didn't. And I think yesterday I think I'm the only one who thought I wasn't gonna get excommunicated, and then I did. So it's like a very powerless moment when you're participating in an institution that's fundamentally unequal, and you're the group that's being oppressed, and you can have all the analysis in the world, and you can be the smartest person in the world, and you can, you know, have all the friends in the world, and you can have all the support in the world, and you can have every reporter in the world interested in your story, but it doesn't matter. Like, they have the power. My relationship to Mormonism is extremely tortured. I love the church, but at the same time, they are behaving like classic symptoms of a very aggressive serial abuser, who tells you that the reason that the reason that he's beating you is because he loves you. That's unacceptable. And so I think relationships are complicated, and my relationship to the church is maybe my most complicated relationship that I have.
Here are a few real-life examples of ex-members being excommunicated and what they had to say about the LDS Church and its practices.
I'm Haley. I am a former Mormon. I had never questioned anything outside of the church, and I wanted the promises of a temple marriage and, living with our families for eternity. I wanted that to be true. So I held on to that for a long time. But at the same time, I had this internal battle of I want it to be true, but I'm really not quite sure that it is. When I went to school and started meeting some people outside of the church, I started kind of like having questions like, hey, these are really awesome people. Their lives are going really well, and they're not LDS. So I started having more questions probably in my mind coming up about maybe the Mormon faith isn't the only way to live and be happy. And then I met my husband, and he's from California. His parents are Catholic, and he was raised going to Catholic church growing up. And my parents told us that they could not support a wedding or a marriage that was not on the road to a temple sealing. And so we had the missionaries over at our house every week, and they were teaching my husband all the different beliefs and doctrine and everything. And I think during that, I started really having some big questions when I was learning, kind of relearning from a very basic perspective what the church taught, and then talking to him afterwards and him being like, Haley, this doesn't make sense to me. We decided to try out a Christian church. During the service, the pastor said, God cares more about people than he does the rules. And I was like, okay, I needed to hear that, because my whole life I'd been living by a rule book and trying to earn my place with God by following certain rules. I started reading the New Testament, and that's really where God started speaking to me, was through those words that completely contradicted everything that I thought I knew. I think for the first time in my life, I was asking God questions and not knowing what his answers would be. And that's when his truth really started speaking to me, because growing up LDS, I'd ask him if the church was true, but in my mind, I had already convinced myself that the church was true. So when I prayed for that, I got a yes answer, but I don't think I would have accepted anything other than a yes answer. I think now, understanding his grace, I want to show grace to others because he shows grace to me. I want to love others because he loves me, not because I feel like I have to, but because I want to. And I finally have that spiritual, close, intimate relationship with him, and I can feel that, and I want to keep that. Through this journey, I've learned that I don't need anyone other than Jesus. He's absolutely all I need. And I've just finally found a relationship with him, and I know that I have a place in heaven with God because of Jesus, and there's nothing that
do the deed with my high school boyfriend, and my bishop convinces me that I am an addict, and I talked to my parents about it, and they agreed that the best thing for me was for me to move from Houston to Utah to get away from the situation and to start therapy with an addiction therapist. I was probably 12 the first time my dad had me sit and read that scripture about being next to murder.
Oh my gosh.
Because we are dealing with the powers of creation and the powers of creating life and the power of taking life, and those are God's responsibility and nobody else's. And if we are not treating them how God tells us to treat them, then we are handling the most severe sins. So I believed I was not quite a murderer, but I was enough of almost a murderer to make my own father cry.
Emily, an ex-Mormon, wrote on her blog about her experience leaving the church midway through a mission trip in Brazil. She quoted, "I was bullied, harassed, threatened, and preached to by members in their efforts to save me or at least teach me a lesson. I learned to get very good at advocating for myself and standing up for myself. I learned to drop people from my life who were hurting me or supporting oppression, and I learned to open my mind once again. In the church, you are taught that people who leave it are dark, crazy, disobedient, lost, or bad people. I've never been happier or more whole. She also spoke in great detail about rituals that happened in the temple, writing, when boys turn 18, they go through the temple for the first time so that they can serve a 2-year mission. This is when they find out about temple ceremonies, plagiarized from Masonic rituals, and complete with bizarre cult outfits. The teachings about them being the master over their future wives, their secret name. They are given a name that is said to be their true name in heaven. Women are ordered to tell their husbands their names, but husbands can keep their name a secret, and many more bizarre things. Later in life, you find out that men are to be the gods of their own planet once they die, and their wives will be merely one of many spirit wives to them in heaven, and they will bear them children and pleasure them for all of eternity. And there are many, many more stories to back up what all of these people said. Just take a look at these video clips.
They're excommunicating whistleblowers and truth tellers, and they're not excommunicating.
Yeah.
So he admits he was not excommunicated.
2 more things. He admitted that he'd never confessed any of his affairs, is what I gathered. He said he would never had any other subsequent church courts or church councils or discipline.
Which calls into question this notion of spirit of discernment. We all think that our leaders have some special power, and we trust in that. And it's pretty clear that wasn't in effect, just like with Mark Hoffman and all the other issues, because he's being called to stake high councils while he's having multiple affairs with men and women. And right, so like, where's the spirit of discernment?
Well, where's the spirit of discernment using him to make those temple videos? Now, I asked him repeatedly in the interview if he had done the temple videos. I asked him 2 times, very point blank, and he denied having any involvement in the temple videos, which he actually did in 2013.
You know, you can try to whitewash this all you want, but any dads listening out there, just think about this. If the spiritual leader in your church came to you and said, God revealed to me that your teenage daughter is supposed to be my wife, I don't know any dad, any normal sane dad today that would be okay with that. I think that is spiritual abuse. I think that is sexual abuse. I mean, these are the words we would use today for this.
I do think that this continues to ask us to consider, what did the church do? Why is it paying? I guess we'll read more from the story. Bill, did you want to make a quick comment?
Yeah, just to that point, which is, as we're listening to the details of the case, it doesn't really seem as though the church was negligent in any way, right? It seems as if the payoff is essentially, don't go public and tell a story that conveys to the public that the spirit of discernment doesn't work. That seems like it's at the crux of what this is about. In other words, you're paying them to keep quiet about a bishop who did really bad things in the off hours. Yeah. And that seems to indicate, what is it that you're afraid of? Well, you're afraid of people learning that your church called a guy as a leader of a congregation, and meanwhile he is sexually assaulting others. The spirit of discernment doesn't work in spite of what Elder Irene tells us.
I get angry, not because of them. I get angry because of the damage they cause. Because they use that education they have. They use those credentials to then fool a lot of people. These guys are using whatever intellectual power they have to promote this system, this destructive, terrible, harmful system. It needs to go away, and they need to stop. And what they're doing is serious, which is why I come at them with serious words. What they're doing matters. It's not just like, everybody's just trying their best. They're not trying their best. It's not easy to publish a book. It takes a lot of work. So you don't get a free pass of just saying, oh, well, he's just sharing his view with the world.
So, is the Mormon Church a cult? This is a big question with lots of opinions. Some people call the Mormon Church a cult because of its strict rules, secretive practices, and the way it controls information. Let's take one more look at the information we have available. 1. Strict control. The LDS Church has strict guidelines on how members should live, including rules about tithing, temple attendance, relationships, and personal behavior. 2. the secrecy. Many of the church's practices, especially those in temples, are kept secret from outsiders and even from regular members. And 3. Information control. Members are often heavily discouraged from reading critical material that contradict LDS teachings, or engaging with former members. These characteristics can make the church seem cult-like, but it is very important to remember that the word cult is very loaded and can mean different things to different people. I'll also leave the answer up to you. What do you think? Comment your thoughts below. As Christians, it is important to approach the topic of Mormonism with truth, critical thinking, and love. Here are a few key things to consider. Mormons use the Book of Mormon, Doctrine and Covenants, and Pearl of Great Price alongside the Bible. These additional scriptures often contradict the Bible. The LDS Church teaches that God the Father has a physical body, which is very different from what the Bible teaches us about God being spirit. We also need to be aware that Mormons are very active in missionary work. They might knock on your door or approach you in public to share their faith. It is helpful to be prepared to engage in respectful conversations about your beliefs. It is also very important that you know why you believe what you believe and can defend it if necessary. Leaving the Mormon church can be very hard for members because of the close-knit community, the sunken cost fallacy, and family ties. This is something we need to be compassionate about when talking to Mormons in general. The Bible warns about false teachings and the importance of holding on to the truth of the gospel. Galatians 1:8 says, "But even if we or an angel from heaven should preach a gospel other than the one we preach to you, let them be under God's curse." And 2 Timothy 4:3-4 says, "For the time will come when people will not put up with sound doctrine. Instead, to suit their own desires, they will gather around them a great number of teachers to say what their itching ears want to hear. They will turn their ears away from the truth and turn aside to myths." These Bible verses remind us to be discerning about teachings that differ from the Word of God. As Christians, we should also pray that Mormons come to know the true gospel of Jesus Christ. When talking to Mormons, try to be respectful and loving. Listen to their beliefs and share your faith without arguing. Educate yourself about Mormon beliefs so you can have informed and meaningful conversations. The future of the LDS Church is uncertain, to say the least. It faces challenges such as declining membership in some areas, increasing scrutiny of its history and practices, and pressure to be more transparent. However, it also has a strong, dedicated core of believers and significant financial resources. The church is likely to continue evolving, potentially becoming more open and addressing some of its controversial practices. How it navigates these changes will change its future and dictate if the church survives or not. I sincerely pray, though, that the church, its members, and the leadership come to know the true gospel and stop following a belief system that can only end in one way. So what do you really think? After all of this, is the Mormon church a cult? How should Christians engage with Mormons? Let me know in the comments down below. Remember to like, share, and subscribe if you enjoyed this video. If you have any other topics that you would like us to cover, please let us know. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time. Keep drinking that good tea. God bless you. Goodbye.